Let us now return to Oppenheimer. Through the early 50s, Oppenheimer became a very public man, making speeches and appearing on television and the covers of Time and Life magazine. He was appointed director of the Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies, where the now elderly Einstein resided. Through this period, Oppenheimer also enjoyed the status of being a Washington insider, receiving calls from high government officials at his office in Princeton, and frequently flying to Washington to offer his various opinions to the powers that be. Unfortunately for Oppenheimer, as well through this period, his rivals became his enemies. Through the concerted efforts of Lewis Strauss of Princeton, a hearing was convened to determine if Oppenheimer represented a security risk to his country. The case against J. Robert Oppenheimer was based on his past leftist sympathies and affiliations, and the star witness was Edward Teller from Los Alamos. On May 23, 1954, Oppenheimer was relieved of his security clearance. The process and verdict of the hearing were perceived by many at the time to be a travesty of justice. Nonetheless, the result was that now Oppenheimer was also effectively stripped of his role as a Washington insider, banishing him from the world he coveted most. In a sense, Oppenheimer was martyred. Why was he martyred? Perhaps it was for the sin in us all. His ambivalence represented the ugly truth that we should have known better. But America and the world still resides within the comfortable bubble of those first early myths and lies. The lie that the bombs were dropped to end the war with Japan, to save millions of lives. That Truman was a plain spokesman, an honest man who had no choice. The endless lies of war. Most of recorded history is about men killing other men. What does it matter if the battle was 1884 or 1885? If the heavy artillery was fully deployed or not? Who won and who lost? What have we learned from all this beyond keeping score? War is sold through the illusion of logic. It is sold through the easy vilification of the other, the vain belief in our own righteousness, the presentation of false choices, the demanded pledge of patriotism, the creation of pageantry and spectacle, the fatally false fantasy of the honor and glory of battle. War is a phenomenon that threatens all our lives, most obviously through the deployment of nuclear weapons. But war is also killing us softly. It kills us through the trail of environmental degradation left by both its preparation and its execution. But most importantly, it kills us by directing our capital and intellectual resources toward the destruction of the planet, as opposed to its preservation. Military expenditures now equal the staggering figure of over $1.5 trillion per year. The solution to climate change can only be addressed by collective, cooperative actions to control the impact of human activity on the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere. This is in diametric contradistinction to the destructive competition of war that obliterates human lives and harms the physical world. We cannot address climate change and our countless environmental concerns if we persist with the institution of war. We simply cannot afford in so many ways to concurrently direct our energies, efforts, and resources toward the destruction of the planet and its preservation at the same time. No other social structures perpetuate the institution of war than the bureaucracies of national armies and their military alliances. Too sheepish in this modern age for the moniker of Ministry of War, they are now euphemistically referred to as Departments of Defense. One might ask, however, if no country has a Department of Offense. Why do we all require a Department of Defense? While we pray for peace, it is always war we prepare for. There is a growing international movement to create national departments of peace and conflict resolution. These departments are an antidote to the institution of war. They rest on three broad principles: peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building. Peacekeeping is a militarily conducted policing function regulated by international law to keep combatants apart. Peacemaking uses legal and political processes to resolve conflict through nonviolent means. Peace building entails creating a cultural mindset that leads to the conditions for peace, as opposed to war. Domestically, these departments' responsibilities and activities include conversion of national armed forces from combat to peacekeeping and disaster response functions, promoting education and research in peace and conflict studies in national school systems and higher institutes of learning, regulating the exploitation of violence as a form of entertainment in all public forums, converting military industries to non-military based production, including new technologies required for environmental protection, and promoting conflict resolution skills in all facets of society, both private and public. Internationally, they work within the United Nations to develop, promote, and participate in peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace-building activities, including disarmament and the development of international law and democratic reform of international governance. At a concurrent domestic and international level, departments of peace and conflict resolution work towards ending the unchecked manufacture and flooding of the world with weapons both small and large. As well, because of the close relationship between energy, war, and environmental degradation, these departments are involved in the development and promotion of safe and sustainable energy policies. We must free ourselves from the death grip of the blackening flames of oil and the cataclysmic toxicity of uranium and the nuclear bombs it gives birth to. We already have the capability to harness the plentiful and peaceful warmth of the sun and the power of the wind to satiate all our energy needs. In Canada, through the efforts of the Canadian Department of Peace Initiative, a private member's bill, C-373, is currently before the Canadian House of Commons to create a Canadian Department of Peace. Only a few decades ago, departments or ministries of the environment were unheard of. The environmental movement was denigrated and dismissed as an adolescent fantasy, foolish, feel-good children who seemed overly fond of the woods. In fact, these early voices were sounding an alarm that now resounds around the world. Ministries and departments of the environment are commonplace, an accepted part of the responsibilities of government and the international community. This represents a seismic shift in governance in an astonishingly short period. Everything has changed save our way of thinking, Einstein observed upon the explosion of the atomic bomb. As we have seen through the private rationalizations of Oppenheimer and the public lies surrounding the creation of the atomic bomb, the so-called logical cortex will lie to itself to allow the midbrain in its endless pursuit of the thrill of the kill. The answer to the riddle we must solve can only be found in Freud's field of endeavor, the mastery of human self-deception and conflict. If we are to survive, we must evolve beyond our brutish primate instincts. We must end the institution of war and the social structures that maintain it. we must reconsider how we live with each other and with the earth we inhabit, because everything, literally everything, is at stake.